Preferences, are they limiting or liberating? Yes, living to your preferences is your birthright. How hard are you working to create a world where all of your preferences are in place? How's it going? What if it's not the picture of freedom you've painted it to be? In this upcoming conversation, I hope to support you in expanding your understanding and awareness to preferences and all that's on offer. Thank you for taking the opportunity to listen, and I hope you find information useful. This is Cherie Ray. I'm a consultant and coach, and I teach people how to eliminate struggle in their lives and businesses. Preferences. I thought this would be a wonderful topic to explore because it keeps coming up in conversations that I have with people. And um, a few years ago, I had a fabulous insight for me on preferences. And I thought I would love to hear from you guys what you think of preferences, because I'd like to kind of get a definition going about what preferences are for human beings and what preferences look like to you. So, would anybody be willing to share a little bit about how you see or define or hold preferences, or even something about your relationship with preferences?
I'll say something. It seems that preferences, in a way, is my way of creating. Um, what do I want to do with this time on the planet, and what am I inspired to do? And that's sort of like, what do I prefer? What action do I want to do in this moment? So I think it's connected to creativity in some ways. Although sometimes I think it's just my rose-colored glasses or my biases that is part of my upbringing, maybe my blind spots. So it's kind of like a love-hate relationship with it.
That's really, I love the tie into your capacity to create, or that even you get to create the world you want to live in, to actively participate and engage in a world that you want to live in. Yeah, that makes sense. Anybody else? And I also think oh, yes, please.
Cherie, I was just writing, our granddaughter just graduated a few days ago, and I was writing her a note, kind of a philosophical, but just grandmother note. And maybe it was a little bit like this, because I was asking her what her mantra might be about life and what it is that kind of stabilizes her. And because I really was seeking a personal opportunity to voice what mine is. And so then I, of course, did. Um, and I think it's that preferences are about desires and choices, looking for something. And uh, I think that maybe I'm wanting to say that my mantra is to say that I deeply trust that my needs will be met. And I don't mean to say that I would ask for a car and get it, that kind of if this, then that thinking. But that by being observant and all, I will see something or hear it or meet someone that will be a step toward how to use choices that are preferences when I'm looking for something or need some help. And so learning that subtlety of how quickly one can come in touch with what theirs are, that every time we don't have to say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. You really begin to have a gut feeling for oneself, I think, or I'll speak for myself about what intrigues me or feeds food for thought or is an outright just gives me a choice. That so I have come to appreciate, and I'll finish with this, that that is a little bit of how I have come to learn to go through life. That my needs will be met, and I can trust that. They won't always have happy endings, but they're a next step. And that it kind of comforts me in times of when things are confusing and all, that I can find reason for that and participate. Okay.
Yes. Anyone else have anything that popped into their mind? Just on how you hold preferences, and even possibly the importance you put on your preferences. I think that is part of what I thought would be interesting to explore today about preferences, in that are they liberating or are they limiting? And I thought it would be interesting to kind of look at that in the sense of, we do as human beings have free will, and we do have the opportunity to choose and make a choice on our preferences. But really, oftentimes these preferences, if we put our well-being as dependent on our preferences being met, I think we're selling ourselves short. That in that sense of, like, I think it can oftentimes be a really strong mindset, and really be convincing that if I don't get my preferences met, as a way of putting it, if I don't get things my way, I'm not going to be okay. So I thought that was kind of part of the way I thought would be fun to look at preferences. Another part to look at preferences was really seeing that, like, for me, I thought it was a birthright, which it is, to have preferences. And I kind of tied it to being the youngest of four. I kind of got, there was not a space for me to have a preference. It was more of living in an environment that was more of dictated, so I was militant or vigilant that one day I would get to pick something and it would be my choice, and by God, it's going to be mine. Just to get that opportunity. And so I really thought that it was like, no, this is my right, and it is my right. But I was over the top, tying my freedom and independence to preferences, and it's like, no, 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 no. I have freedom regardless of if my preferences are getting met, so I could let that lay down. Okay. And another piece on preferences was, it looked like preferences were a really good thing. They're not a bad thing. I'm not saying that, but I mean, it's like a really, really good thing by God. Really, really good thing. So I hear this a lot from my clients that are looking for a partner. Now, anyone who is looking for a partner or even a companion, oftentimes they have preferences, and those preferences are strong, very, very strong. And so that also played into the notion of, okay, now our preferences in that situation limiting or liberating? And it started to look like, well, if that criteria has to be met for you to even say yes to meeting someone for coffee, you might be eliminating a large part of the population, a really, really, really large part of the population. So you're not even, what I'm saying is, like, in that situation, you're really being a slave to a mental criteria and not opening yourself to another human being for a connection as a human being to a human being. It's not saying you need a second date. It's not needing saying you need to compromise uh, your principles, your standards, anything like that. But truly, truly, I've 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 heard some pretty surface things about preferences, about the color of socks or something like that, and that would discount and disqualify someone on any interest in getting to know them any further. So not good, not bad, but I'm saying if you're really in a place of uh, wanting to embrace life or live life more fully, continuing to expand with life, it might be interesting to look at preferences in the sense of reflection and go, are they limiting life coming to me? Are they opening life to me? And thirdly, is my well being attached to my preferences being met? So if anything come to mind, yes, please.
It's me again, but I'm
Great.
thinking that preferences lead to choices. So there's a little bit of, seeking preferences for
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
information and giving breadth to a choice that one wants to make. And so maybe preferences can certainly be strong, but they can also just generate food for thought,
Yeah.
and which is what you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
of course. But I think there is a distinction that between a preference and a choice, that in the sense that what their relationship is to one another, I'm not positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think for me, one time it showed up that, and this was the way that it showed up for me was we were having a conversation about living in the city or living in the country. Okay. And I was like, I'm a city girl, not going to the country. My husband's going, I'm going to the country. I'm not living in the city. And my mind made up that I would not be okay if I went to the country. I would die on the vine. I mean, it made up all kinds of stories about what life would be like in the country. And it was like, not no, but no. It's like stop by, visit often, not going to the country. But what that brought to me was um, I still haven't changed my stance on that, but I really thought it was my truth that I would not be okay. I had to be where I wanted to be okay. What the insight came to me several days later, and I thought it was so funny. And my I call it my God self has such a sense of humor that I woke up the next day and I saw preferences as limiting because it's like I saw it as, and this is how my God self painted it, was I had determined and decided I was going to live in one slice of pizza. Okay. I woke up the next day and realized that God in the universe was offering me the whole pie. But I had made camp on one piece of pizza on my on my preferences, you know what I mean? Like my preferences had defined it and painted a limited vision of life when in reality I'd be great anywhere I could get my mind behind, that I'd be okay. If I really sat in the truth of you're okay no matter what, you wouldn't need to suffer if your preferences weren't being met. If you really understood you had the capacity to rise to the occasion, and that I saw it so clearly. I was like, "Oh my gosh." And if 24 hours prior to having that insight, if somebody had told me you could see it differently, I said, "Nope. Nope." There's no way to see it differently. It was so definitive that it was no way to see it differently. And the next day it was almost kicked me back on my heels and like, oh my gosh, I never thought about preferences cutting me off from opportunities in life. Of just cutting you off from opportunities of um the limitless nature of life. So that's what I wanted to point to in this conversation is to have a really fresh relationship with your preferences and with a fresh awareness of absolutely choose where you want to choose, but don't let your thinking mind convince you that you have to have your preferences met to be okay. Because then what happens is we work so hard to get those preferences in place. We exhaust ourselves because we're under this guise that if I don't get things in place, I'm not good enough. I haven't done it right. I'm not going to be okay. There's something wrong with me. You can see all the places where your mind might take you, what it makes up about you, what it makes up about your well-being, what it makes up about um, how it can really rob you of your peace. So that's what the conversation is about, and kind of to go back to my pizza analogy, my intuition always gives me stuff in movies or food. It's just the way it works. That you know, preferences are great, but are you if you open it up and relax a little bit, are you leaving something on the table? Are you leaving opportunity on the table? Are you underestimating your resilience? Are you underestimating your capacity to rise to any occasion? Which is really allowing the spiritual nature behind life to support you, where your mind might convince you you don't have it, or you just couldn't do that. Um, it could having a fresh relationship with your preferences is, you can expand with life, be instead of being limited, kind of like painting yourself inside the box with your preferences, but you could open the box, still be in your preferences, but the box is open for you to expand into life and expand into new opportunities that may not be invited, but you get to, you wouldn't fight when they show up. You wouldn't fight when they show up, which would take some of that struggle out. So you might have a fresh mindset about what happens in your life with things that show up that, weren't invited and you certainly wouldn't have chosen them. But here they are. So I'm curious. Yes, please. Oh, muted. You're muted.
Well, what are you curious about, Cherie?
Well, you were waving. So I'm curious about what.
Yeah. I have a story.
Excellent.
About preferences. Because as soon as you brought it up, I was like, oh, well, okay. I'm, most of my life I've been interested in women. Okay. It's been a preference, right? And I'm kind of hanging out with this guy, and he's kind of like, tells me this story about this a woman with this gay man that they ended up in a, kind of compromised position. And she was kind of like, well, just improvise. So in other words, he's kind of trying to get me to sort of like to have that mindset, to just be a little more open maybe, and I keep, I'm like, I'm kind of open, but nothing's really happened, because I have this resistance. And so I guess I'm kind of like trying to be a little bit more open, just a little bit more, like I realize, like, I don't have to lose control. I can, have a little bit of an adventure. I'm with a safe person. All right. I can, I have my choices, and it's okay to sort of be a little bit more open, and you know, instead of saying, oh no, I can only be this way, I can only be this way. And I think it's fun to consider those options. Like whenever I hear myself thinking, oh, I can only do this, or I can only be that, I start to question myself now. Is that really true? Or is there another option, you know? And that might be even more exciting, or even bigger, or better, or broader, or, you know, more to my liking, or whatever, you know, like, why do I have to limit myself in my life to anything for that matter, really? So that's my
Truly,
story.
and if you know that your wisdom will inform you in the moment, your wisdom will inform you in the moment. You haven't abandoned uh, you haven't abandoned discernment, and you haven't abandoned the wisdom in the moment. So in the same way that you're not fixed on anything, you can relax in that.
When you were talking about that, I was thinking about um, limitations, but having preferences and judgments is about situations, and how letting go of judgments about, you know, well, I would prefer this, but this is what is on offer, and I can
Today's
either,
menu, as we say.
yeah, and I can either go with that, drop my judgments about it and go with that, or I can, you know, stay judgmental. You know, prior to you talking, Lisa, I was thinking about how do I, you know, preferences. I don't even know how I was trying to think, well, how do I, what do I prefer? You know, what, you know, like food, I could, okay, well, I could prefer food, but I don't know that's something I would limit myself, maybe, you know, or, but then I thought about how I think about uh, myself, and I would prefer to feel, well, I prefer to feel good, you know, as opposed to, but you know, maybe I should limit myself to just thinking that I just need to feel good. Maybe I should be more open to feeling however I feel. I don't know. That's what came to mind.
That makes sense. That makes great sense. It's like even that it's like I heard someone say once, and I love this. Like, no, um, I only signed up for good experiences. You know, I didn't. I didn't sign up for anything else. And it's like, well, guess what? You know, that may be what you signed up for, but that's not the nature of life. You know, the nature of life is you're going to have all possible experiences, and knowing you're going to be okay and supported by the spiritual nature of life in those experiences, like you said, in the highs and the lows, in the highs and the lows. And you could work really hard. I certainly did. I worked really, really hard to only feel good. And it was exhausting and overwhelming. And it's like neither state of being is constant.
You know, when you say that, it
Hmm.
makes me, it's like a relief. It's like, oh, you know, it's okay for me to feel however I feel. Yeah, and I can be good with that.
It is.
I'm
It
not
is.
sure it's true, but it's a thought.
It
You
doesn't
know,
mean you like it anymore. I don't think you like it anymore, but I think it doesn't. It doesn't take you out of the moment as much if we go into action for every low feeling, because I prefer not to feel it. Like I said, only signed up for good feeling. You don't go into all this action of reaction to a low feeling and exhausting yourself when it's only going to exacerbate the low feeling. It's not going to move it on.
yeah. Wow, it's interesting.
Hmm. Yes, Doreen. You're
I think
unmuted now.
there we are. There it is. Thank you. What's coming up is that I'm realizing that preferences help me measure risk. And therefore I can kind of extrapolate from them to think about what's there to lose? And or what is there to have as an adventure? And so they maybe help give some order to choices. Making a choice is that it brings up an emotional reaction or even an analytical thought process that helps us be faster in making choices, and becoming maybe more self-aware. Sometimes if we're just locked into certain things and we think, okay, I'm self-aware, well, yeah, you are, but you haven't expanded very much. But by allowing preferences and variety of different perspectives or whatever it is that is about the choice to be made, then I think we not only become self-aware, but it gives us a sense of, again, I would say measuring the risk. And that helps us measure how much we're afraid or how much we're, oh gosh, yeah, I might get that out of it or something.
I like that in the sense of like being self-aware, and am I becoming self-aware of, am I in a limited reality or an unlimited reality? You know, and that and I think all our entire life we're going to get an opportunity to redefine, uh, you know, what awareness is constantly going to wake us up, wake us up, wake us up to a fresher definition than what we held yesterday or 2 weeks ago or 1 year ago. We have a fresher definition. And that awareness is where the gift is. It's like it's going to keep showing us where we've put limitations on our life, you know, where we put limitations, our mindset has put limitations on around this limitless nature of life. And I like the idea too. I don't know. I like the idea too. And I've been told I'm quite Pollyanna, but it's like, you know, what if your mind, this has been true for me, that my mind could not calculate every outcome. Now, matter how many times I looked at a situation and I might have, I say I have a double PhD in risk management, you know, looking at all the possible outcomes of a choice. And it's like, I don't know how that works, but if I've examined every single one, somehow the one that happens was not a single one on the list. It was a complete and total outcome that my mind did not, could not, didn't see, you know. So in that same sense of like, don't allowing yourself to really see that the spiritual nature behind life is going to support you wherever it happens, because we're all still here in this conversation. You know, we've all covered lots of things in life that were never invited, and here we are. So something supported us through those times when we couldn't do it or couldn't imagine it. And that's the piece. That's the piece where it's like and when it comes to preferences, it's like the preferences are great, but you're not dependent on them. That's the whole point of the conversation. That you're just not dependent on them for your okayness. So hopefully that helps your guts relax a little bit. Hopefully it takes something off your mind that you're good no matter what. But all the while, choose. I think that's why Baskin Robbins did 31 flavors, you know? Choose away. Go for it. And yeah, you get a chance to play with it. So there's another piece that came up just that I really wanted to um, see, that while preferences are good and wonderful and choose away and enjoy them, um, I think another opportunity is when your preferences don't get met, but you realize you're still good, that you might possibly have been introduced to something fresh. Your life had the opportunity to expand, or it didn't devastate you, one or the other. That to me, it's a big invitation to just not believe everything your mind everything you think. Like X is going to be devastating. It's like, well, mhm. Or you can't do that. Or that's not okay if they don't meet my demands, that's not going to be okay. If I don't get this right, I'm not going to be okay. And maybe it helps to use that word awareness, bring some awareness to how much assumptions and judgments and beliefs we buy into. And it's all via, what comes into our mind, not good, not bad, but we could have an opportunity to see that it's nothing more than thought in the vapors versus reality showing me a brick and mortar forecast of the outcome. It's just an imagined outcome until it happens. We don't know what the outcome would be. And we get that. Awareness is all, to me, awareness is all we need. And we're not in control of awareness, but awareness comes to us to help wake us up to what's limitless, what's potential, what's possibility. So I think if in that place of like preferences are great and wonderful, but again, you're not dependent on them. You don't need to have them met to be okay. And if you can have a healthier relationship with your preferences, or if you already have a healthy relationship with your preferences, and seeing that life is wide open. Life is wide open and you're good no matter what. You're good no matter what. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Oh, this was another thing that occurred to me too. Just FYI, like relaxing around having to have your preferences met, you get a chance to be surprised by life. You could be really surprised by life and kind of this unfolding mystery of life, which again invites your life to get wider, not smaller. Let's see if I had anything else I was thinking about. I love the idea of being surprised. I love the idea of a fresh experience, even if you didn't plan it. Not all fresh experiences can be planned. A lot of the great surprises were never planned.
Well, just wanted to say that, like, sometimes, you have a preference or whatever, and like you said, I think it just doesn't go your way necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And like, to me, that's a good time to like say, okay, then where is it going to go? Instead of just like slamming the door on myself and saying, oh no, I can't stand this. I'm in a, there's no options here, right?
Right.
Instead of taking a look and saying, hey, maybe there's a reason, like maybe there's a bigger option. Maybe I'm being supported by the universe and directed in a different direction for some kind of a good reason. Who knows?
Yes. Yes. When you said that, I was kind of like going, oh, okay, I could either, when you said that, I was like, okay, I could either be that kid in Target who's on the floor flailing and throwing a fit for not getting a toy, or, if I wanted to act like some sort of higher functioning being, I might play the game of, well, maybe there's something in this for me, maybe there's something in this for me.
Yeah, that's happened to me because I've tried to go on this trip for 3 years and things happen, and I still don't actually expect to, but I do think I will this time. But that's just because things are supporting it,
Yeah.
So, and before, it wouldn't have been right if I tried to force it to happen. It wouldn't have worked out right. You know what I mean? It wasn't the right time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
It's all worked out for a reason, the way it did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I truly am a past veteran of pack my toys and leave, if I don't get things my way. So um I'll out myself. But it's like, boy, the world kind of like got smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's like, oh, so the name of the game is that people aren't here to meet my preferences. Nobody was signing up to get in the front of the line to meet my preferences. What an innocent thought to carry, somehow it was supposed to work that way, especially if you voiced your preference that somebody's supposed to say, oh, sure, I'll do that, like, maybe not. Yes, by me.
It makes me think that maybe my preferences are not really my best line of action. Listen to you again, Lisa, thinking that you wanted to take these trips, but then they didn't work out, and so maybe there's something higher intelligence that knows better what I need than I do. Than to follow my preferences.
Mhm.
I like to think that. I don't know, but yeah.
I do too, because it looks that way to me. And then also I'll say, like, in that place of aligning with your preferences, also see it wakes me up to where I put a limitation on myself, because I've gotten in the past few years, I've gotten some really absurd invitations. And it showed me where there was a limit, how far my boundary would let me look at life. And then I said yes to quite a few of those absurd invitations, and life just kept getting bigger. But those invitations weren't even inside my circle of reality until I got them. And then something wouldn't let me say no when all the logic in the world said you can't say yes. So and that's not so preference related, but it is limitation related, where you start to kind of see another way that limitation is in your sphere and you don't know it. Again, awareness helps wake you up to that limitation. And then life expands again, and then life expands again, and then life expands again. So I think in if that place of like, if opportunity is always knocking, that again, we don't have to believe that our preferences are essential to be okay. We don't have to fight for our preferences. We can choose them when we can. And how can be more peaceful when we don't have our preferences met? And that, preferences are really a fabulous thing, but they can be surface fodder instead of really exploring more depth within yourself.
It just makes me think that preferences are a way of maintaining control, or they can be.
Sure.
Like I've known people in the past who said, oh, I only do this, or I only eat that, or I only drink this one wine, and only listen to this kind of music. And I remember thinking at the time, this was years ago, but I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, I don't have any of that. I guess I should get some. Like preferences, similar childhood thing. You weren't given preferences. Your preference is to eat or go to bed. So to me, like Bobby said, preferences were more about food, like, oh, I like brown rice better. But preferences seem to equate to opinions, and you weren't allowed to have any opinions. So I've spent most of my life thinking that I really wasn't, struggling with, I listen to everybody talk and I think, oh my God, I never even thought about that, because it just wasn't allowed. So it's like preferences. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many I have. I know that I'm going to be really aware of it now, how many I have that are not like I prefer blue ink than black ink, but is that life, is that earth shattering? No,
And it's all to be played with. It's like holding your preferences as something to play with,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
something to play with. Yes.
Interesting.
Nancy, you bring up a point to me. I remember one of my good friends who taught at Pooh Corner, if any of you are familiar with that school, but the children, it's a Montessori school. And someone talked to them about helping to train children not in dualistic thinking, either this or that. And you instead say to them, you can eat and you can go to bed. And then that forces the child to make a choice. In the very change of the word and or. And so preferences allow us to expand to more complicated, complex variety of things, and also put a responsibility on us in a way to make a choice. I think many people avoid preferences out of fear. They just are fearful of change. So they are comfortable with knowing what happens. Sometimes what's been happening is not so happy, but they are comfortable with, they have found a way to deal with it. But that did come to mind, that preferences foster broader thinking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even if you, I love the flip side of that part about like if preferences, that there's some sort of liability to even having them. That's limiting right there. Like you'll get voted off the island if you tell somebody, no, I don't really want to do that. When you said yes to it for decades and then you go, no, I don't want to do that. So it's a way to bring light or awareness into all of these little caveats or little dark spots we have around preferences. So it's all an exploration to just see what else wants to unfold for you and how you hold them. So thanks everybody. Anybody else have any other questions before we wrap things up? Well, I'm so glad you all came to the conversation. I just think it's fun. I love to just have a conversation because I hold things one way in my mind until awareness shows up and shows me something fresh. And I just feel everybody does the same thing. We all hold things in our mind and we think that's the way they are, like gravity. We hold them in our mind. They look that fixed, that solid, that fundamental. But they're not. But they're not. Thank you for listening to Preferences, Liberating or Limiting. I hope you found information that was helpful. It was a great conversation and really seeing the many facets to preferences. In all conversations that I hold, the whole point of the conversation is to hopefully open all of our perceptions, ideas, and thinking around the topics that we discuss. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like, please reach out to Cherie at cherieray.com. I look forward to hearing from you.